So, back with some niche counters, and this time we're going to be countering Calyrex Ice Rider and Miraidon. That's one of the duos that people had clocked to be very, very strong together, because, you know, Electric Ice, Bolt Beam, we already know how strong that is. And given you've got basically a speed sandwich between Miraidon being super fast and really offensive with single target electric type attacks, and super slow Calyrex Ice Rider with very strong spread ice type attacks, that is a very good combination. So the point of these guides is not necessarily to say, hey, these are some great Pokemon in Regulation I. This is saying, if you've got a team that you're really happy with, and you've got maybe 4 or 5 Pokemon that's working, but you are just struggling with, in this case, Calyrex Ice Rider and Miraidon, this might be the perfect 6th Mon for that team to be able to help specifically with that archetype. These are Pokemon that are going to be very strong against both Miraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider as a pairing. They're going to be in alphabetical order, not necessarily saying that the earlier ones or the later ones are stronger than each other, just alphabetical order. Starting with Annihilape. So this might seem like an odd one to say this is a counter to Miraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider, but one of the nice things about Annihilape as a counter is that Calyrex Ice Rider is a very, very bulky Pokemon. Like, it's got a huge amount of bulk, and it's very difficult to one-shot it. Final Gambit will one-shot it, because it has 100 base HP for Calyrex Ice Rider, and this has enough to be able to one-shot it with that Final Gambit. And Miraidon is choice specs. They won't be able to protect from the Final Gambit, and also have a maximum HP that would be KO'd to this Final Gambit. So that's the main point of this Annihilape, is that Final Gambit from this will be able to OHKO either of the Restricteds and free up the rest of your team. And then you've just got the classic Close Combat Shadow Claw as the stabs on the Scarf one to round it out. And coaching's pretty good. We've already seen that on the Scarf Annihilape. We should know how Scarf Annihilape works at this point. It's just a reminder that, yeah, Miraidon and the Calyrex Ice Rider both get OHKO to Final Gambit, and Miraidon can't even protect from it. You don't necessarily need to go max HP on Annihilape. There is nothing relevant between this amount of HP and max HP Annihilape, so just getting a little bit of extra attack on the close combats could be crucial. And the Terra, again, doesn't really matter. The defensive typing doesn't matter. It's more utility, and Grass is able to ignore Amoonguss and be able to Final Gambit next to Amoonguss and ignore it completely. So, yeah, Final Gambit, that's the first counter. Excadrill, that's another Pokemon you probably won't expect to be a counter to both of them, but thinking about it, this resists all 3 of the attacks that Miraidon will want to go for. It's immune to Electric and resists Dragon and Fairy, so it's going to be able to shrug off the attacks reasonably well. I say shrug off the attacks. Nothing really shrugs off Miraidon, but this will do its best. This is exactly the same EV spreads that I got top 4 and top 8 at 2 different regionals back in the Moon format in 2019, and I did really like the Banded Excadrill. That had Stomping Tantrum over high horsepower, so it's actually been slightly buffed in the fact that it's got higher horsepower, which is way stronger. You can either choose Terra Steel or Terra Ground, whichever one you think you want the extra power on. You've got High Horsepower as the single target, you've got Earthquake as the spread, Iron Head is his best steel type attack, and then it's kind of whatever in this 4th slot. You'll almost never click this 4th slot. Rock Slide is just for some flinches and get some extra spreads when you don't want to hit your partner with Earthquake as well. You can absolutely run Sand Rush or Sand Force if you are running it with a Tyranitar, which actually is a Pokemon later down the line on this list, but Mold Breaker, if you don't have Sand, obviously will be the best thing to buy some abilities occasionally. So yeah, Excadrill is able to resist all of the attacks and actually do some pretty significant damage. Frosmoth is a counter to Miraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider because you've got Ice Scales to be able to, again, shrug off is the loosest sense of the word because nothing shrugs off Miraidon, but especially if you've got Quiver Dance with Ice Scales, halving the damage you take from special attacks, it's actually going to be able to survive pretty comfortably, especially if you go for Terra Electric and then be able to resist the attacks. Electric Seed will benefit from Miraidon's electric terrain, which means that you patch up the worst part of Frosmoth in its very, very poor physical defense, and then you're able to actually, with Ice Bug, one of the worst typings, and if not the worst typing in the game, actually resists both of the attacks that Calyrex Ice Rider would want to go for. If it's close combat over high horsepower, then it's neutral, but most are high horsepower, and this resists Ice and Ground, which is very, very rare indeed. It's not going to be able to like taking those attacks if it hasn't got its Electric Seed active, but it will still be able to shrug them off a bit. And it's got White Guard, so you'll be able to protect your team against the Glacial Lances that would be fired off. So the main downside of running Quiver Dance, you probably should run Quiver Dance on the Frosmoth anyway to make it a better counter to Miraidon. And think of it like a Calm Mind, unless you manage to get a couple of Quiver Dances off, then you'll actually outspeed what the speed is for Modest Miraidon. So you'll be able to outspeed those after 2 Quiver Dances. But just think of it as a Calm Mind rather than a Quiver Dance on the first one, because you're not really outspeeding too much after 1. But then if you do get 2, you can easily sweep. And actually, with 125 special attack, it's actually doing some pretty respectable damage afterwards. Grimmsnarl, setting up the screens. This could be like a Klefki or a Sableye or whatever Prankster Pokemon. I think Meowstic as well would be viable as well in going for the Prankster screens. because the Calyrex Ice Rider will rely on sweeping through Trick Room, and if you have the Reflect up, it's not going to be able to do that as effectively. And then if you deny the first turn KO in the Trick Room, then suddenly they don't get the Chilling Neigh boost, and then they can't sweep. Similarly with Miraidon, it OHKOs a lot of the format, and then suddenly with the light screen it no longer does. So then you'll be able to survive the attacks and be able to respond with whatever with the rest of your team. Having Foul Play or Spirit Break I think is pretty reasonable. Usually people only have one. It's fine to have two, because if you're putting this on your team as a Miraidon and Ice Rider counter, Foul Play counters the Ice Rider but will do really badly into Miraidon, and then Spirit Break counters the Miraidon but will do pretty badly into Ice Rider. So I would argue that if you're using this guide like I'm intending it to be, as in this is going to be the perfect 6-1 to counter this archetype, I would probably have both Foul Play and Spirit Break. Usually you have one of them and then some kind of extra status move to make use of the Prankster. Like Thunder Wave is really good. Scary Face would be better against Miraidon because you can't Thunder Wave the Miraidon if you're putting this on your team as a Miraidon counter. And Terror Ground is just so that they've got the guessing game of do they go for Electro Drift into the Grimmsnarl or do you Terror into ground? And / do they Draco Meteor your Fairy as a very brave player? So they have to lock into either of those. And obviously they can still Dazzling Gleam, but you can't cover for everything. So this spread is just having the equal amount of bulk in defense and special defense. You don't really need much speed. You can run it slower, and yeah, if you want to run it min speed so that you'll underspeed the neutral Calyrexes and get the foul plays off, that would be perfectly reasonable as well. Iron Boulder is a rock type, and rock is really good against Calyrex Ice Rider, while benefiting from the Miraidon going for its electric terrain by activating the Quark Drive. So this is actually a Pokemon that I was considering on my, on my Koraidon team that ended up going to Stockholm previous iterations before. That is why I've got Terra Grass and Solar Blade on it. So I would strongly recommend pairing this with either Koraidon or Groudon. But if you don't do that and you still want this on your team, then Solar Blade should probably be something else, because then you don't have to charge in the sun and you can get some kind of extra coverage. If you're a braver man than me, then you'll run Zen Headbutt over Psycho Cut, but I would want the consistency of 100% accuracy rather than the Zen Headbutt, which does seem to miss quite a few too many times. Mighty Cleave is really good, breaking the protect of the Calyrex, so you've got a guaranteed Mighty Cleave into it. A lot of Ice Riders run Fire so that they're immune to Will-O-Wisp, and then suddenly they stay weak to Rock, so then suddenly Mighty Cleave is a really, really good counter to it. I would also pair this with a Chien-Pao if the intention is this is supposed to be a Miraidon counter as well, because with the Chien-Pao's help, and this was why it was on my Koraidon team when I had a Chien-Pao on that team at that point, a Quark Drive boosted Mighty Cleave helped with Chien-Pao, with the Sword of Ruin, into a quick attack that's being helped with the Sword of Ruin, is able to knock out the Miraidon in those two attack combinations, which is really, really funny. And that's why I've got quick attack. Obviously, priority just in general is pretty good. You don't really need much extra coverage. Mighty Cleave is what you're going for, like 90% of the time. Just getting the extra priority, but that combination was really funny, and that turns Iron Boulder into a much more reasonable Miraidon counter, while also being pretty good against the Ice Rider as well. Iron Crown is also going to benefit from the Quark Drive getting the electric terrain, and there's another Iron Pokemon on the team as well. I haven't included Iron Hands because everyone knows what Iron Hands is. This is supposed to be niche Pokemon. If you want a counter to Miraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider, Iron Hands is perfectly reasonable. But these are some more niche ones. And Iron Crown is able to hit Calyrex for actually very significant damage with the Quark Drive boost if they've got Miraidon already on the field and got the electric terrain. Tachyon Cutter will do a huge amount of damage to Calyrex Ice Rider. And then Terra Blast with Terra Ground. You've got the Steel Ground coverage, which is very, very good. I would still having Expanding Force, even if you don't have Indeedee, because Indeedee is a very reasonable Pokemon to see. And in my opinion, in this format, dropping 10 base power for Expanding Force, even if you don't have Indeedee, over Psychic is worth it for when you do end up facing that Indeedee. I would have Psyshock over Expanding Force rather than Psychic if I was going to drop Expanding Force and sacrifice the potential of getting the Indeedee boost as well. But I would also recommend Modest. Like, yes, you can run Timid and get the speed boost if you drop a bit of special attack as well, but at this point, you're actually not doing that much damage. Like, not enough to really justify it. So I would recommend just going with the Modest and going as much damage as possible, because conveniently, you still outspeed the Adamant Urshifu's by 1 point. Even if you are Modest. So that would be my recommendation. The special attack boost, the damage you will do is much more beneficial than the speed boost, in my opinion. Speaking of speed boost, yeah, run the speed boost on the Iron Treads, I guess. This got second at EUIC, so it is an entirely reasonable Pokemon to be able to put on the team, and it's got the same typing as Excadrill, so it's going to be able to, again, shrug off is not the right term, because look at that special defense, it's not very good. It will survive, Yeah, it's already proven its worth. It's got second at an international, so it is a very, very reasonable Pokemon to be able to put on the team, because it will be able to outspeed and one-shot the Miraidons in and out of its Terra, as long as you've got the correct move selected. And then Iron Head will do a very, very respectable amount of damage to an Ice Rider, and I believe that Steel Roller will just OHKO it if you have terrain on the field as well. Obviously, it could Terra out of it, but Steel Rollers can still do some absolutely massive damage. And again, this is supposed to be a perfect 6th mon to counter Miraidon and Ice Rider, so you're probably going to have the terrain a reasonable amount of time to make use of the Steel Roller. This is exactly the same spread that Dillium's got second at EUIC with the Terra Ghost. That's what they were using, so that's what I'm recommending, because they clearly know more than me when it comes to Iron Treads. So through the Iron Pokemon, like I've said, Iron Hands is pretty good as well, but we all know how that works. So Snorlax, it's really good special defense, like really, really bulky, and will shrug off, again, this one will shrug off. I've said shrug off a few times. This is actually really shrugging off the Miraidon attacks to an extent, compared to the other Pokemon that I'm saying shrug it off. And then with Thick Fat, you're able to resist, quote-unquote, the Glacial Lances, so then you won't actually take much damage from them either. So Assault Vest is necessary, I think, to make it better against Miraidon, and then you have High Horsepower to hit it super effectively, where if it doesn't Terra, and then Gunk Shot to hit it if it does go super effectively, because Terra Poison is really good on Snorlax as a defensive Terra, because then it resists fighting, and then you'll be able to get the extra benefit of Gunk Shot as well. And then while the Snorlax is on a team, well, it's supposed to be really good against Shadow Riders as well, so why wouldn't you just have Crunch as a way of just OHKOing them / forcing the Terra, and if they Terra, same logic, if they're a Fairy, you can Gunk Shot them. So Snorlax seems like it's completely dropped off, and it used to be just a Belly Drummer, but this, again, would work pretty well against Miraidon and Ice Rider, because it's able to actually survive the attacks pretty comfortably from both of them. Swampert seems a bit odd, but you can curse slower than a Ice Rider, so that you'll be able to hit it under the Trick Room conditions, and you've got Wide Guards to help with Glacial Lances as well, while being a ground type, so that if they lock into an electric type attack, then they can't touch you. Yes, they can go for a Draco and be able to one-shot you, but then they are -2, and then it should be a bit better. And if they lock into Dazzling Gleam, you can go for White Guards. So I think the Life Orb would be necessary if you're running Swampert. Like, don't forget Gastrodon. Gastrodon doesn't work, because the point of the Swampert is that it has White Guard. So you have to sacrifice the Storm Drain in order to have that White Guard and make it better against both Miraidon and Ice Rider. And then you need the extra damage, because 110 is fine, but it won't be good enough. So I would recommend having Life Orb over something like Leftovers, because yes, defense boosting and then Leftovers recovery is pretty good, but you'll feel too weak otherwise. And this is a Pokemon that I've used in the previous generation. Dynamax was available, and it was much better when Dynamax was available, but even though it's not, it could still be pretty reasonable as that perfect 6-mon. I did mention that Tyranitar was further down the line, and here is the Lenitar, where you've got max special defense. So I've been saying shrugging off. This one actually will, like, not take much damage from Miraidon, because you've got the Assault Vest and you've got the Sandstream, so that's going to multiply your special defense by 1.5 on top of the Assault Vest as well. So actually, for real this time, this will shrug off the Miraidon attacks, while hitting, again, super effectively into Calyrex Ice Rider, because this is a Rock type. So to be a as good a counter to Miraidon and Ice Rider as possible, you want as much special defense so that you're actually taking the attacks from Miraidon, and then because you're not investing in attack, you're not going to be doing as much damage with the rest of your attacks. So I've gone for Foul Play as the counter to Ice Rider. It is the same logic of Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl should run Foul Play if it wants to be a better counter into Ice Rider. There's no reason why Tyranitar could not do the same thing. Yes, you're not making use of your 134 base attack, but you're not investing in the attack because you're putting in special defense instead. So then, yeah, Foul Play and Snarl is a very good combination that we've seen on multiple Dark Pokemon across the restricted formats. Like we've seen it on Umbreon, and we've seen it on Mandibuzz when that got second at EUIC and AIC back in 2020. So Foul Play and Snarl is a really good combination. Rock Slide and Knockoff, hopefully self-explanatory. They're the go-to stabs on Tyranitar. Knockoff is utility and still can do some pretty good damage, but I reckon you'll be relying on Foul Play a bit more if you are using this Tyranitar. And then Fairy is to make it slightly better against Miraidon, because if they've locked into Draco Meteor, then you are not taking any damage. And it does resist fighting, which obviously Tyranitar does not enjoy taking. This is the final Pokemon on this list, and I would argue it is probably the most reasonable to slap onto your team, so long as you've got Pokemon that don't really rely on their abilities, because this will actually properly counter Miraidon by turning off its Hadron Engine, so it is going to be significantly weaker by not being able to get that boost from the Hadron Engine. And this will be able to burn the opposing Calyrexes. It will be able to taunt the opposing Calyrexes so they can't get Trick Room, so this seems like it would be a pretty reasonable counter as well. But I think most of us know how Weezing work at this point, so I am not going to comment too much more on that. So those are the Pokemon that I found that I think could be pretty reasonable as a 6th mon to counter Miraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider. If you've got any other suggestions that you have found that I missed off this list, or you found in your own play that have worked out pretty well as countering them, then please do put them down in the comments. Also tell me which restricted pair you'd want me to see next, because I've started off with Calyrex Shadow Rider and Zamazenta, and Miraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider, because I think that those are probably going to be the 2 most common ones. There's a load of other restricteds to go through. Please let me know which ones you'd want me to do next.